Well, let's talk a bit more about this. James Morton is from the Scottish Trans Alliance. Madeleine Kearns is a writer for the National Review, a conservative-leaning magazine in the US, but she is back home for Christmas. Thank you both for joining us. Let's just get into, I suppose, J.K. Rowling, what she said in her tweets. Dress however you please, call yourself whatever you like, sleep with any consenting adult who'll have you, live your best life in peace and security, but force women out of their jobs for stating that sex is real? Question mark. I mean, first of all, coming to you, James, what do you see is wrong with that tweet, if you do indeed see something?
So I feel that she's misunderstood what the judge was saying in the case. So in the case, what the problem was that Maya was unwilling to respect the fact that the Equality Act and the Gender Recognition Act exist and allow trans people to change their sex in the eyes of the law, and in terms of providing goods, facilities and services or working alongside a colleague. If somebody's transitioned, then it would be creating an offensive, humiliating, hostile environment if you were constantly referring to them only in their birth sex and refusing to accept their lived sex as they are now. So I think that it's not about whether or not... So I agree that biological sex characteristics are real. I wouldn't have been distressed as a trans person if they weren't real. So yes, I was born with female biological sex characteristics, but I went through a transition. I've got a gender recognition certificate. I live my life as a man. And it's important that if I'm going to a workplace or I'm using a service, that I can do so with dignity and not have people refuse to just refer to me the way that I live my life.
So Madeleine, come back to the tweet and again help me in the audience, because it seems to be you can be born male or female, and whether you're assigned that sex is an argument, and then whether you can be free to say you've changed your sex or your gender, or we conflate the two, and then people to question whether you can change your sex or your gender. Do you think J.K. Rowling was right in what she said in her tweet?
Yeah, I think her tweet was making a fundamentally liberal argument. And the argument was very clear. She said that people have every right to express themselves however they wish, that people have every right, all people have every right to live in peace and security, but that this right extends to women too. And that women have a right to live in peace and security, to stand up for their sex-based rights and protections, which is what Maya Forstater had done, without fear of losing their job. We're in the middle of a national debate right now, both in Scotland and in the UK at large, about the meaning of sex as it relates to laws and policies. Lots of women have lots of concerns. They just want to get a fair hearing. They just want to be heard, their side of the debate to be heard. And what the Maya Forstater case signalled was that if you participate in this debate, as the Women and Equalities Minister in Westminster said we were allowed to, as the Scottish Government has said we are allowed to, if you participate in this debate, you could lose your job. And I think J.K. Rowling was absolutely right to stand up for this woman and all women everywhere, give them a sense that they too can have the courage to speak up about things they consider to be important.
I mean, a lot of this case, of course, there's the transgender rights, but in this particular case, it does seem to be a lot about freedom of expression. Do you think, James, for instance, this debate is always really sensitive and kind of divisive, especially when it takes place online. But do you think there can ever be freedom of speech, freedom of expression on gender issues?
So the judge was really clear that it would have been fine for her to have argued against the Gender Recognition Act reforms, to state her views about how single-sex services should be provided and whether trans women should be allowed to use women's services in that way, but that it wasn't necessary to repeatedly call trans people their birth sex and be willing to create a state of harassment for trans colleagues or service users in order to do that. So it's about allowing a human right. It's about allowing an employer to have their staff held to a particular standard of behaviour. So it's not about trying to prevent people having discussions. It's about trying to make sure that those discussions are done respectfully.
Madeleine, you talked to James. Do you accept that James is a man?
No, I don't. I believe James is a woman who identifies as a man. I resent slightly that you brought me on your show and tried to make it quite personal, because I think that's very
I'm
unfortunate.
not trying to, but you reply to that then. So this is the crux, isn't it? That you can't... Sorry, I interrupted you. Anyway.
Yeah, sorry. So I believe, as many people do, as human beings have believed for thousands of years, that sex is binary and immutable. Now, I don't wish any ill will to anybody who decides to present as the opposite sex, and I'm willing, and I frequently do. James and I had a perfectly civil, respectful chat before this show to address people as they wish. But I really do not think that it is appropriate for liberal democracy to compel people to say things that they do not believe. That is why you asked me a direct question. You asked it. I've answered it directly because I think it would be humiliating for me to not say what I believe. And that is the crux of this issue, is that lots of people really do feel that you cannot change your sex, that sex is determined and observed at birth. They have scientific reasons for believing that. It has been unquestioned for thousands of years. And this is what this very debate is about. So in a way, I'm grateful to J.K. Rowling that she has triggered this debate, given people like me and James a chance to meet, a chance to talk about it, to exchange views, discover, surprise, surprise, in the green room that we don't hate each other, that actually we just have a different point of view. And I think that's very constructive.
But, I mean, James, do you feel that debate around this is constructive? I mean, so much of this stuff, I mean, it's huge public interest at the moment. Obviously, the Scottish Government is consulting on it, but it has been hugely controversial, and a lot of the debate does, as all debates now at the moment, seem to be quite polarised.
I think it's been really distressing for everybody trying to participate from all different viewpoints on this topic, and I think Twitter is mostly responsible for that. I think that it's taken nuance out of it. It's resulted in a sort of tribal, sort of like kind of sparring and flame wars, and it's really, really harmful to everybody. It's harmful to feminism. It's harmful to trans rights. We need to try and take the heat out of this. We need to try and have respectful conversations, and that's what Scottish Trans Alliance have always been committed to. And I think there is a fundamental difference between debating whether or not the Gender Recognition Act should get reformed to make it easier for someone like myself to change the birth certificate, and people debating should the Gender Recognition Act exist at all, should it be repealed. It was right up at the European Court of Human Rights back in 2002 that established that where a trans person is living in that sex, that the government should treat them that way, and that they should have that dignity of privacy about their previous sex.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, we're going to have to end it here, but
thank you.
Really interesting, and thank you so much both for coming in and having a civilised conversation about
and
this. So
chatting beforehand. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
James. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.